Here we go.
What's up, SVSers? Nick back here with Larry and Gary for another virtual audiophile happy hour. I think this is either 6 or 7 for us guys. Can you believe it?
Hey, everybody.
I don't know how many we've done between all the demos that you and I do and all these shows. I think I'm losing track of how much time we're spending on here, sir.
And we just have so much fun. How can you ever, keep a count on that? And, as is the normal, we know it's not perfect everywhere. So, Gary, if you'd like to share a couple words before we kick into things, then we'd love that.
I got to say, I've been waiting for this. Our last one was 3 weeks ago. We were doing them every other week, and we're going to get back in that rhythm. I missed you guys. I missed our community. But I want to stress what we're doing here. We know that some people are suffering. Some people don't have jobs. Some people may have even gotten ill or have loved ones who have. And by no stretch of the imagination are we saying, hey, this is fun time. But what we do feel is we really want to stay connected with all of you, and that's what these audiophile happy hours are all about. So pleased we're all together. The comments are coming fast and furious, guys. So it looks like we got a good group here.
I know. I got to stay focused here. I try to double task and get distracted.
Nick is reading comments.
I know. So obviously we had a big holiday weekend this past weekend, and I imagine there were some grilled meats at the Larry household. Larry, what did you get up to this holiday weekend?
Well, we definitely grilled all day Saturday, watched quite a few movies, got caught up on some TV shows, just hung out with the family, played some games. So it was a good time in the Magoo house and my garage.
I had probably the least relaxing holiday vacation I've ever had with my 3-year-old and a couple of other little nieces and nephews who have been seeing on the regular, and all sorts of water activities, but it's one of those you get back and it's just more exhausted than before you left. But just good to connect with nature, be out there on the water and, riding the ATVs, good time. So, Gary, what'd you get up to?
We were home. It was a great weekend, 3 days, really good weather. We're in the DC area in Maryland, and I grilled 2 of the 3 nights. I'm not the grill master like Larry, but we got a new grill. I had to wait like a month for it, and we finally got it in time for this weekend. So we did do some grilling. It was fun.
Awesome. And just so everyone knows, if you're a first timer, and I saw a couple comments there that first timer, so thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you everyone else for shouting out where you're from. What we do is basically 4 random giveaways throughout the course of the evening. Tonight we will be giving away a pair of Prime Bookshelf speakers, a PB1000 subwoofer, Prime wireless speaker system, and our recently awarded SB2000 Pro subwoofer. We'll get to that one on a little bit later.
A lot of awards.
Yeah, a lot of stuff going on there.
Some secret ones we're not allowed to talk about yet. And Nick said, "Don't even do that," but I did anyway.
You just can't resist, can you?
I can't help myself.
Hey, as long as Gary is getting us in trouble, not you and I'm cool. So Gary, keep talking about cool new stuff.
I get myself in trouble. That's the truth.
And then people ask us about it, and we have to validate. So all good there. We only go as far as you do. But we also have our first 2-time guest on. This will be the second appearance for the legendary Director of Technology and Customer Service for SVS, Mr. Ed Mullen. He's patiently waiting to come on now, but he will be joining us in a little bit to answer your technical questions and talk some gear with us. So super excited for that. But before we jump into that, I think we've all been sort of home, as many other people. Gary, what have you been watching? What have you been listening to over these last couple weeks since we've been doing the last one?
So I got a couple new ones. One of the things I did, Larry, I signed up for Disney Plus, which gave me 2 things that I have been very curious about. I watched Hamilton, and Hamilton on Disney Plus comes in full-on 4K and Dolby Atmos, and it really is a cool experience. I have never seen Hamilton. I have several friends that are just super passionate about it, so I definitely recommend it. I finally got a reason to join Disney Plus, and my Disney Plus also gave me ESPN, and so I'm so far 5-6 episodes into The Last Dance, the Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan thing, which is really, really cool. So those, and then the other thing, Larry makes fun of me, but I actually have enjoyed it, is getting old Blu-rays and DVDs and kind of checking out classic movies. That's been a lot of fun.
Well, you've got to change that. I make fun of you not because you're checking out the old movies, but I didn't know anybody that still did DVD by mail via Netflix.
It is weird. It is weird.
You're the one remaining. You're like the members only, the last member of members only.
No wonder they always have what I need in stock. I'm the only one using it.
Yeah, I signed up on day one back in the 90s whenever it launched, late 90, whatever. I was right there. So I still used it quite a bit back in the day.
And Larry,
we have a great relationship with Netflix, as you know, via CTA, which I'm on the audio division board of CTA, Consumer Technology Association. We have great connection with Netflix, and we made a really cool demo sizzle disc, which then the backstory is it showed up at CTA headquarters after they closed it down because of the pandemic, and they're all sitting there. So sooner or later, we're going to have this phenomenal Netflix demo disc. Larry, remember at our last event, we demoed it for people.
I've got it right here.
You have like the only one in the world then, if you have it. I think
so.
Yeah.
You're sworn by blood oath not to give it away, though.
Yeah,
so
I've got it. It's not going anywhere.
Staying true there. Getting some love for the T-shirt too, Larry. You want to drop us a reference on what that's from, for anyone who doesn't know? Everybody
in my demographic is probably very much familiar with the movie Old School. And Speaker City is the shop that Vince Vaughn owned and, had Snoop Dogg come out and do a little concert for. So very, very great comedic element to that, too. And every time I wear it out, somebody's like, oh, I missed that store. And
did you watch Old School this week or you just wearing the tee? What did you watch this week?
Oh, man, I've been watching a ton. We haven't seen you guys in 3 weeks. So I finally watched Deadwood, all 3 seasons in the movie. So that was fun getting caught up there. Umbrella Academy comes back in a few weeks, so we've been revisiting that to get caught back up, ready for season 2. And then HBO Max, which I know we've talked about, dropped a bunch of new movies, and I watched some cheesy comedies this weekend. We did Loaded Weapon, if you remember that spoof.
Classic.
Great. And then a couple of the National Lampoon's movies. So we're doing that right now.
Classics. Very nice. Yeah. Going vintage with your watching. Well, I'll keep mine quick. I mean, I tried to stay a little bit more contemporary. There's some movies I haven't seen. Midway gave my SB3000 nice little workout. Some of those scenes, I don't think the sleeping kids liked it as much as I did, but that's just par for the course. I also checked out The Five Bloods, which I know we talked about a little bit off the air, Larry, and it's just very relevant and very great storyline. So I enjoyed it immensely, and I would encourage anyone else to check it out. And then just last night I got sucked into a movie on HBO called Paul, and it's got your boy Simon Pegg, who I know you love from James Bond movies, but I just found it to be very watchable, very entertaining. Lots of good star power, Bill Hader, a couple other pretty good old SNL actors, Kristen Wiig. So I don't know. It's an enjoyable sort of low investment, if you want to just kill some time.
Yes, it is.
Maybe we should also talk about one we saw that we hated. Is that worth it?
Wow. Yeah, I try to avoid that though. You
always want to keep it positive.
That I hate. But if you got something in mind, Gary? You got something on the tip of your tongue there?
I mean, I kind of do, but I wasn't going to bring it up. Look, I'm getting crap about what I'm wearing. For Father's Day, I got COVID-19 clothes, like clothes that you can wear here, but no pants, just shirts.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wearing one of my Father's Day presents. We saw this Netflix show called The King. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's like a retelling of the story of Henry IV, Part 1, the Shakespeare thing, Henry IV, Henry V. Really boring.
Yes,
and you know how it was kind of date night, so I had to not complain about it. Goes on for like 2.5 hours, so that's my one to complain about.
All right, well there you go. Don't watch The King, anyone. Whatever you do, avoid.
Some other people like.
That's
I feel bad.
So actually, we wanted to kick off with a conversation this week. Larry and I recently were a part of the first ever virtual hi-fi summit, and I have to give some love to a couple of YouTubers out there, Joe and Tell, Youthman, as well as Techno Dad. They worked incredibly hard to put this show together. Obviously, the times we're in, we're not able to go out and do the demos and do those audio shows like Axpona, like Rocky Mountain. They've all been canceled. So we personally look at that as a very important thing for the SVS brand, to get out there and just show our products off whenever we can. And without doing that, this was sort of a next best step. So we had a lot of fun talking about Subwoofer and speaker setup and, joining the little chats that they had. So that was all good, but it kind of drove me to want to ask about the future of hi-fi shows. And, currently with the climate we're in, it's evolving. But Gary, what are your thoughts on, what we can expect for hi-fi shows, both in person and virtually down the line here?
Well, I'm eager to hear your all's thoughts as well. But what I would say is that I really miss these shows. It's obviously not something that can happen in the middle of a global pandemic. For those of you out in the SVS community, the first one that was canceled was High End in Munich, which is actually the biggest audio show in the world. And I was just heartbroken. That's such a great show for SVS. It's a massive show. We get people from all over the world. It's so much fun. Munich is obviously a great city, and boom, canceled. All the audio shows all summer long, including Expona. I know that's your favorite, Nick. Expona in Chicago got canceled.
Love me some Schaumburg, Illinois.
Yep. And CEDIA, which is the one for the integration community, custom installation community, got canceled. That's in September. IFA, which is a massive show in Berlin, is around the same time as CEDIA in September. Also is not canceled, but no one's allowed to go. That's a weird. It's like they're only allowing like 1,000 people to go. So this is a show that gets more than 100,000 people. But you know what I think? What I think is, in the end of the day, these products are not theoretical. They're real. They need to be experienced. People need. What I love about these shows is SVS is all about a phenomenal demo, and a phenomenal demo needs to take place in a real place. It doesn't just exist as a concept. So I'm very optimistic that CES in Las Vegas, which is this January, will actually happen. I've been asked, because I'm involved with CTA, with the audio division board and a few other things, I get asked fairly often by the press about what I think about CES. And I'm going to say, we need CES more than ever this year. And I really hope it happens. And I know CTA is looking at some really interesting innovations to make people feel safe, even if we're not past the pandemic. And if you ever do come to Vegas and see our display at CES, you'll understand why we need to do it, because we have a massive home theater demo. I'm there, Larry's there, Nick's there, a bunch of other members of our team are there, and we are sharing what the SVS experience is live in real time to people that may not have ever experienced it in person, and there's nothing to replace that. So short term, I'm sad about losing these shows. Long term, I'm very optimistic about it. And I got to say, not just the trade shows. You guys are my partners in going and seeing our SVS community out in the world. We do these shows in stores. We had events that had more than 500 people at them, right, Larry?
Oh yeah, we had quite a few people pop into our in-store events. So this is kind of what we're doing to replace that for now.
Yeah, some people are asking whether CES is open to the public, and there was a time when I think they had the last day open to the public. You do have to be within the industry, so there is that. But I personally would love to see that happen and love to get back into it. Imagine 6 hours of this, but with actual music and movies playing. Like, how great would that be? And maybe not as much bourbon on my side, but I think really
that we know about.
Yeah, that water bottle is.
Well, we do set up a bar
for a reason. But I will say, I think there's a world where both can exist. I like the virtual approach from what it allows from like a platform standpoint, because, you get people excited about the hobby, and the biggest obvious downplay is you don't get the live demos, which you just spoke about. And that's what we love to do, but there's still an opportunity to educate people. There's an opportunity to talk about new products and the technology behind them. And I think that's what this summit really got right. They focused on that. And then they did some giveaways to try to get people to really, gravitate towards it. Because anytime you're doing a first-time event, there's going to be an uphill climb to get people to want to attend. But I thought all the elements that they put together for a first-time event really hit it on the head there. So props to Joe and Tell and Techno Dad and Youthman. I thought they did a great job. But Larry, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, because you've been pivotal in all of our events, both virtual and in person.
Well, it's a little difficult to not get out and do those things. All of us travel for a living, essentially. I spend 40 weeks a year on the road. So I do kind of miss the interaction with the retail staff, everybody that we get to interact with at our events and stuff. But seeing how many people we're able to interact with now, it's a whole new ball game because sorry, that's an alarm. I have to send you a report, Gary. So
get to it.
Right. Your timing's impeccable.
But not being able to interact with everybody is kind of been something that's missed from all of us over the last.
I really miss it. I have to say. But let me ask you guys a question. We know once this pandemic scare is over with and everybody feels safe, we're going to go back to these in-store events, right? We're going to go back to live events, and in fact, we could probably reveal that in places where we don't feel like we have perfect retail store to use for that, we were looking right before the pandemic hit. We were looking at hotels where we could do an SVS event without a retailer, so that we could go to cities where people like our community that are making comments right now would say, come to this town, come to that town. And we felt like we didn't have perfect retail venue for that. So we just said, we're going to just get a hotel, make sure it has free parking, and have a great event just with us. We'll still do that. But let me ask you, Nick and Larry, do you think we should keep doing these virtual audiophile happy hours even when the pandemic is over and we're doing live in-person events?
Sure.
Larry?
Yeah.
I mean, this is fun. I mean, this takes so much. Well, I don't want to give the secrets away, but there's a lot less that goes into this than one of those in-person events, and they're just as
we're winging it. Be honest.
You don't have to wear pants.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We're totally winging it.
Yeah.
So all good. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't see this stopping. So and I do like my bourbon. And for those people who have asked, I am drinking Eagle Rare tonight. I got upsold a bottle from my local liquor store guy to get the big one, and I fell for it. So it's delicious. But anyone who was asking. And on that note, I think that's a good cue to bring out our special guest. And we'll do a giveaway right after we bring out somebody that I think a lot of people who have ever worked with our customer service team have had an exchange with Ed Mullen, our legendary director of technology and customer service. Hello, Ed. How are you?
Hi, guys. I'm doing great. How's everybody out there?
Hey, Ed.
What are you sipping on, and what have you been watching?
Red Breast 15. Breaking
Very
out the
nice.
Irish tonight.
Ooh, you're going top shelf for the happy hour. Good for you.
Last name is Mullen, so every now and then I gotta break out the Irish.
And I think you recently finished something that Gary's been promoting here in terms of a series. What were you recently watching?
We watched Narcos. I thought it was fascinating. It took me maybe half an episode to get used to the narration theme, and then I was like totally into it. And it's based on factual events, so it was just I got really sucked into it and loved it. And Gary says Narcos Mexico is good too, so I think we're going to pick that up next.
I don't blame you one bit. I recommend every season. They're all phenomenal. And I did promise a giveaway, so we are going to our randomizer here. First giveaway is a pair of SVS Prime bookshelf speakers. Charlie Close from YouTube. One of our colleagues will be reaching out to you, get your information. Congratulations, Charlie. You are a SVS Prime bookshelf speaker owner.
Congratulations.
So we are going to get to some of your technical questions because I know Ed is the sage when it comes to speakers and subwoofers. But we did want to kind of jump into a question that came in. What was that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Nick. I just was going to say, Larry and I, even if Ed and Nick are talking, Larry and I are going to be watching the comments. We're going to try to bring your questions to Ed in real time. Ed has an incredible depth of technical knowledge, and he's interacting with customers every day. But what people don't know is behind the scenes, he's helping us make our products be the absolute best they can be too, because he's technically so skilled. So
Ed's been with
we're
SVS
watching the comments
since pretty much day one. Like, you have been here since the earliest days of SVS. So let's keep that in mind.
17 years.
Expertise.
Yep.
So we had a question on the last happy hour, which was sort of about wireless speakers, which obviously super popular when you're talking about mainstream audio solutions. And the question was really, why would you need a speaker that's on a Wi-Fi network and not just Bluetooth enabled? So, Gary, maybe you can kick us off with a couple thoughts on what you gain from having a speaker that's Wi-Fi enabled versus just a Bluetooth speaker.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, every Wi-Fi speaker is also Bluetooth. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who doesn't include Bluetooth functionality in their Wi-Fi speaker. But there are really important benefits to having the speaker work in your home Wi-Fi network. if you're streaming, or even if you're not streaming, even if you're using your own files. Bluetooth in and of itself is a very limited point-to-point transmission platform that uses compression to get from point A to point B. So what that means is whatever the source is of if it's your phone, it's not taking that content exactly as it exists on your phone or what you're streaming. It needs to compress it and remove some of the content in order for it to be transmitted to the speaker or to the wireless receiver. So in and of itself, Bluetooth is not as good sounding. Secondly, Bluetooth is really limited because it's 1 point to 1 point. So there's not a whole lot of features that go along with Bluetooth. You play your phone, you choose the Bluetooth device, and it plays to the Bluetooth device. There's a simplicity to that, but it's also limiting. Wi-Fi, well, you guys know Wi-Fi is a massively broad way to transmit data. And because of that, Wi-Fi can be used to transmit data without any compression. And in fact, our system, and there are others, I don't want to make it sound like this is an infomercial for SVS, but our Prime Wireless system can transmit over Wi-Fi CD quality or even high-res quality sound from your phone or other device to your smart wireless speakers, or we have our sound base, which is our smart wireless component. That is going to be dramatically better sounding than a Bluetooth connection, and it's also going to be better sounding even than listening to CD. So it's a huge step forward in terms of sound quality. Also, because it's Wi-Fi, there's a lot more functionality that can be built into it. So you can have multiple zones. You can group the zones into a group. For example, you could have 4 speakers in one room and make them one group. You could have your living room and your dining room, and you could have them be separate zones, but then if you're having a party, you could make them part of one group and play the same music through both. So there's a lot more functionality there. This is why Wi-Fi speakers usually there's more attention given to them and they sound better. Larry, what would you say on that? I know this is Ed's time, but Larry's really good with Prime Wireless.
Some of the things you just kind of mentioned there, if you think about it, if you've got your phone in your pocket and you are streaming something off your phone via Bluetooth and you go downstairs, well, now you've got to disconnect from whatever you're connected to. And then if you've got another speaker downstairs, or take it with you. If you have, say, like Prime Wireless, like I do, on our sound base, and have them scattered around your house, a lot of you are going to be familiar with multi-room audio, whether it's the little dots or other brands that do multi-room. They're all really made for background music. And that's something that our approach to this is a little different, is we want a stereo solution in every room. High-res streaming, the ability to play stuff off of your phone or off Spotify or Tidal or Qobuz or Pandora or whatever, and not even have to use your phone. So we use the preset function in our house a lot. But
we had the comment. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Larry.
No, I was going to say, and I saw somebody ask, are we going to make a sound base with type product, just a streamer without the amplifier? And a lot of people don't know you can use the sound base as just an amplifier, as just a streamer and connect it up to an existing product as well.
Yeah. And we had the comment on there about mixing wired and wireless speakers. And I think that actually sort of gets to why you would want Wi-Fi versus just Bluetooth. Ed, can you speak to the reasons why you would or wouldn't, or if there's any any issues with combining a wired speaker with a wireless speaker, a wired speaker in a system?
Well, if we're talking about the Play-Fi universe, the nice thing about DTS Play-Fi in our system that uses it over Wi-Fi is that you can set it up for 0 latency. So normally with a wired connection, there's no latency, but with a wireless connection, there is latency. So you can have time lag, and especially if you're watching a video, there's a lag between the video and the audio, so you get lip sync errors. Not all of that goes away with DTS Play-Fi with 0 latency.
So another question that I saw, which I think is people don't really understand the role that a DAC plays, but essentially was, what is the role and why do you need a quality DAC in a wireless speaker, powered speaker? And I know this was something that, we debated with Prime Wireless in terms of which one we wanted to use. Gary, can you give a little insight on what the value of a DAC is and what it actually does within a speaker?
Well, I'm glad you asked, only because, when we designed Prime Wireless, we invested in a really high performance DAC, and there's basically a kind of a industry sort of belief that you're wasting your money by building a product that has a super high performance DAC, because this category is all about conversation level sound and maybe talk radio or something like that, but not really great sound. But a really high performance DAC can, first of all, what is a DAC? It stands DAC, digital to analog converter, and basically it's the magic in taking that high res digital signal, especially important in a high res signal, the magic of taking that digital high res signal and converting it to analog signal that then gets either sent to your power amplifier, or you use the power amplifier on your Prime Wireless system. A really sophisticated high performance DAC is going to sound way better. And this really matters, especially when you're using CD quality files or CD quality streaming or high res quality streaming. We put that DAC in there because we wanted Prime Wireless, and I don't want to make a Prime Wireless commercial. Anyone who's trying to make a high performance powered smart speaker should use a very high performance, high resolution DAC.
I think that's why they sell separates in a lot of cases. If you have a component that doesn't have one, you can get a standalone. But Larry, did you have additional thoughts you wanted to spew on that one?
Well, I was kind of looking at that too, and then seeing all the questions come through. And, I know we were talking before we got on the broadcast about maybe doing something around wireless. And based on the questions here, I think we might need to visit that and give you guys some more information on a Prime Wireless product, because having the DAC in there obviously is going to make it sound better, the ability to play more music files in higher resolution forms, and then some of the functionality that you get from whether it's the wireless or the sound base. You've got some stuff you're going to be able to do that you really can't do with anything else in this category. So I think it's a topic that we'd love to spend more time on with you guys too.
Yeah, we better ask a question for Ed. I'm feeling bad. He's our special guest and we're not talking to him.
Oh, I was getting to Ed.
Well,
luckily we work together, so he can't get too mad at us.
I think we're about ready for another giveaway first. Is that okay? Before what
sure.
we
we should. You're right, Nick.
So our next giveaway will be our SVS PB1000 subwoofer, a absolute powerhouse here, and we're going to announce Justin Parker from Facebook. Congratulations! You are the owner of an SVS PB1000 subwoofer. Congratulations, Justin. You're gonna have some bass rock in your house here shortly.
Congratulations, so, Justin.
We'll get in touch with you. All right. So I'm gonna go in a different direction completely from what we were just talking about. And I saw a couple comments, and this has come up on almost every single one of our broadcasts. And it's really what the difference is in performance when you're using power amps versus AV receivers, benefits, drawbacks, etc. And Ed,
your AV receiver with a power amp. I think Ed this is a good one for Ed.
And Ed, I know you've probably answered this question, more than you can count on 2 hands and 2 feet. But what is your insight? What can you tell people who are asking about the benefits of one versus the other?
Well, we probably all remember the day, at least if we're old timers, when AV receivers had 5 channels and we were doing 5.1. And the size of the power supplies in these AV receivers really hasn't changed much over the years, but we've been adding channels, right? So we went to 7.1, and now we're looking at 9 channels, 11 channels, even 13 powered channels. So really the slices of the pie just keep getting smaller and smaller, and the power supply really hasn't changed. So when you're looking at a demanding soundtrack that you're playing at loud volumes and you're trying to power 11 or 13 speakers, the AV receiver just starts running out of gas. It just can't support a high volume without clipping or dynamic compression. So what's the solution? We add an external amplifier to the AV receiver. It's very easy to connect. You just use RCA interconnects between the pre-outs and the amplifier. And generally, you want to use the external amplifier on the heavy lifting channels, the front stage, the front left and right, the center channel, maybe the side surrounds, and take that load off the AV receiver. In my particular system, I let my AV receiver power the rear surrounds and the 4 overheads because they're small speakers, it's light demand, and my external amp powers the front 5 channels. Really, what's the benefit? Big improvement in dynamic range. The system sounds very effortless and uncongested at loud volumes, and definitely better than the AV receiver powering all the channels.
And that's one piece of it. I am going to say, because I saw some comments that people enjoyed seeing my systems from the last show we did, and it was fun showing them off. Guess what, guys? They're totally different. I've already changed it around a bunch of things. And one thing
That not surprising.
I know it's an obsession, right? One thing that I did was put a power amp in a place where I didn't have one before, or I was using the amplifier section of a receiver, and I was struck not only by the effortlessness of it, as you point out, Ed, but also there was a refinement to it. The high end was clearer, but also warmer. It was almost a contradiction. And the imaging was rock solid, as opposed to it was a little less defined. So imaging meaning the ability to create that sound stage that you can almost see where the performers are as you listen to it. So I think a really high performance power amp gives you that effortless, as you say, headroom, but also refines the sound quality and makes it a more, for lack of a better word, a more audiophile experience.
It's a better quality amplifier for sure. So you get the sound quality improvements. Channel separation is better. I definitely noticed the sound quality improvement the minute I fired up my external amp. I'm like, wow, this is definitely a step up over the amps in the AV receiver.
Nick, leave Randy's comment up there. That's a good question for Ed.
Ed, what do you think? Separate power outlet? Can you get by with the normal, load?
Maybe explain the benefits of our digital front end so that Randy doesn't feel like he has to rewire his house for a SVS subwoofer.
Right. If you think about it, subwoofers, like any audio amplifier, are transient demand devices. It's not like you're running a vacuum cleaner or an air compressor or a space heater where it's pulling 13 or 14 amps from the line continuously. So generally you can get by with one 15 amp circuit for your home theater system, maybe a 20 amp circuit if you're running 2 subs and external amps, but there's not really a reason to put a dedicated circuit just for the subwoofer itself. What I do recommend, though, is keeping other devices in the house off that circuit, especially if they're continuous demand devices, chandeliers or space heaters or something like that. And light
dimmers create noise, right, Ed?
They do, yeah. Light dimmers create noise. I've got a dedicated 20 amp for my home theater system, and it's fine. I've never run into a problem at all.
We've got about 100 people asking for recommendations, and we will say we don't play favorites here. We don't like to pigeonhole, but can we name a few brands that work well with any speakers? To do all those people who are asking for recommendations a favor.
The external amps?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm running Emotiva in my system. Outlaw's good. Adcom.
Gary, I think you showed us a Mark Levinson. Gary, you showed us a Mark Levinson in your system.
I mean, Mark Levinson is probably, I don't want to say that because it's sort of expensive. I'm lucky to be able to have Mark Levinson in my system. But, I think that somebody mentioned Anthem. That's an excellent power amplifier, amplifier. I'm a fan of Rotel. I think they're affordable. They perform well. Ed, Emotiva, I just got a really nice Emotiva power amp that I've been playing with. I think it's great stuff, and it's fun to play with this stuff. I think people don't realize the benefit of these upgrades until they do it. And look, we're not trying to. It's a fun hobby, and each you can do it all a step at a time. You don't have to feel like you got to break the bank on the first, on your first try. Yeah, sorry, Mark. Mark Bartel, I'm sorry.
Stop spending my money.
It's a dangerous hobby.
Apologize.
Yeah, if you're into this hobby, you never stop. I mean, that's right. We're always upgrading throughout our
trading up, down, sideways. That's what you got to do. But there's another question that came up in one of the previous episodes that I think is somewhat germane, more on the AV receiver side of things. But a lot of people might be running an AV receiver that only has a single subwoofer output. So if somebody wants to run duals off a receiver that only has a single output, one, can they do it? And when they do it, what are the options and what are the sort of benefits and drawbacks of doing
Ed, why don't you also just briefly say the benefit of why they would want to go dual?
Oh, there you go. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, dual subwoofers obviously will give you an increase in dynamic headroom, and that's what most people think initially, but there's also benefits in smoother bass at more locations in the room because the standing wave pattern is just denser, and so it's a better experience at more listening positions, and the subwoofers are also more difficult to localize. They just kind of disappear in the room, and the bass seems like it's coming from everywhere. So I'm a big fan of dual subs.
And when
So
you're
it's not just for the sheer output that you've
Right.
added, but it's because now you have 2 points instead of one where the sound is coming. So the chance of phase cancellation and peaks and nulls all over the room in different seating positions becomes much less likely.
Minimized, right?
But now, what if you only have one subwoofer output? What's your recommendation?
There's a bunch of legacy AV receivers out there that do have just one sub out. So what we recommend is using what we call a splitter. It would be a one male to two female device. We sell them as an accessory, and then you can connect a subwoofer cable to each one and run that to each subwoofer.
So do you lose signal power by doing that? Like, is less output going or signal power going to each one of the subs?
No, the voltage is exactly the same at each branch of the splitter. And what a lot of people don't realize, they think it's going to suck more power from the subwoofer pre-out, but it doesn't. And the reason why is the input impedance of the subwoofer is so high. We're looking at 20, 30, 40,000 ohms that it just doesn't pull any power at all out of the preamp. Little pre-out for the subwoofer. So really it's just we're looking at voltage being exactly the same at both sides of the splitter.
Hey, I want to react to Joe's comment. Joe said, hey, I thought you said we only need one. Joe, absolutely. One placed correctly is going to be awesome. We're just talking about levels here. So the last thing I want to do, in fact, I have 5 SVS subwoofers in different systems right now in my house. I know it's embarrassing. No, I have no dual setup.
Well,
I have
you
no
don't have
dual
to
setup.
Yeah.
But what it does mean, though, because I have one in each of my systems, I do have to think more carefully about how I place it, how I set it up. I need to be smarter about how I do it. But Ed's team, and Ed especially, are really, really good at, yes, Legacy Star. I have 5. Ed's team is really, really good right on the phone with you or via chat, helping you to figure out how to make that single one sound amazing in as many seating positions in the room as possible.
I'm the same way. I've got 2 systems in my house with a single sub, and you just got to, like Gary said, you got to work a little bit harder to find the right spot for the subwoofer where it sounds good at the listening position. And we have some tips on that on our website, like doing the subwoofer crawl and moving the subwoofer around and finding a spot where it sounds good at the primary listening position. That's really what it's all about.
You mentioned the splitter as an option, but there's another way too. There's daisy chaining is what they call it. Can you briefly explain that, and then what maybe the differences are between using a splitter or daisy chaining, if any?
Well, a daisy chain would be running an RCA cable to subwoofer 1 and using the line out from sub 1 to run it over to sub 2. The only downside there is a lot of subwoofers on the market. The line out is high passed because it's designed to send that signal to a loudspeaker amplifier. So it actually kills the bass on the downstream subwoofer. So you want to be careful when you're daisy chaining to make sure that the line out is not high passed. And an easy way to sort of foolproof that is to actually put the splitter at subwoofer 1. So you can run an RCA cable from the AV receiver to sub 1. Put the splitter at sub 1. It's the same 1 male to 2 female, and then take that spare female jack and jump her over to subwoofer 2. So we call that just external daisy chaining, and that's a kind of a foolproof way of avoiding that potential pitfall with the line out.
But the best is just use a Y adapter and run 2 lines, right, Ed?
Yeah, it's easier. And you can daisy chain more than 2 subwoofers together too. Again, not the recommended way, but if you wanted to do that, you had a single output, you wanted to run 3, 4 subwoofers, like how far can you go daisy chaining?
You can daisy chain pretty much limitless, because again,
but you can also Y it out as many times as you want.
That's correct. Yep. You're not really sucking power out of the pre-out because the input impedance is so high at the subwoofer.
There you go. Well, I think that was a very complete answer there. And it actually brings us to another interesting topic that I think is confusing to some people. And I know you spoke to me about this specifically, Ed, based on some interactions you had. And that's sort of the difference between bi-amping and bi-wiring. I think people get them confused a little bit. Maybe define one versus the other, and then we can talk about the benefits of bi-amping and bi-wiring and what all that means.
Yep. Okay, so let's start at the speaker itself. You can't bi-amp or bi-wire unless the speaker has 2 binding posts. So
two sets of binding posts.
2 sets of binding posts.
Sets, yeah.
So though normally those binding posts are connected by a jumper, and you've just got one connection to the speaker. So if you're going to buy wire or buy amp, remove the jumper, and then if you're buy wiring, you connect 2 sets of cables to one output on the amplifier. So it's still a single output on the amp side, but it's 2 cables and the jumper's removed. What's the benefit of buy wiring? You know, there's a lot of debate. It's kind of an evergreen topic on the forums. A lot of people argue about it, but basically the concept or the theory is when the woofer voice coil moves back and forth in the gap, it creates back EMF is what it's called. And that electromotive force can travel over the jumpers into the tweeter network and modulate the tweeter network. So that
Ed, you're getting a little past the little too technical for some.
Well, let me I have to say let's talk about I'm one of these guys that doesn't like audio black magic, but I've actually heard the benefits of buy wiring. I've heard it, and so at least I feel I have, and the benefit is it just feels a bit more open, and the bass feels just a bit less constrained. It could be partially subjective, but there's no harm in buy wiring. You're basically decoupling the tweeter from the woofer on the speaker, right, or tweeter mid-range from the woofers, and there's no harm in it. By amping, on the other hand, Ed, talk about that. That's literally using the 2 different inputs on the speakers with 2 different amplifiers.
Right. So the most common bi-amp scenario is if you have an AV receiver that has bi-amp capability. So you would configure it for bi-amp, and then you would connect the woofer section to amplifier 1, the tweeter section to amplifier number 2, and you obviously follow the instructions in your AV receiver on which ones to connect to. So what's the benefit? Well, you're doubling the amount of power going to the speaker, so you pick up 3 dB of additional dynamic headroom. So the system will sound more effortless, and you'll have better dynamics and less compression and less potential for clipping at loud volumes.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people coming, just real quickly, I see if you want to look at the 2 differences, Prime series, you cannot do bi-amp by wire, but Ultra has the dual sets.
Correct.
So just so that I see those.
And just remember, this is very subtle stuff. This is not going to hit you over the head.
Right. This is critical music. You know, critical.
I will say one thing that is really critical, and maybe I'm stating the obvious. Never buy amp with 2 different amps. Always use the same amp. Meaning, if you're going to do that and you want to use 2 amps on 1 pair of speakers, it has to be the same amp. Don't use 2 different ones.
And why is that?
Because they have different sonic signatures. They sound different. They have different input sensitivities, most likely. It's
right.
It's a
so
big.
Could that actually damage the speaker, or just make it sound?
No, it's not going to damage the speaker. It'll just damage your experience.
Larry, have you had experience with buy wiring, buy amping? What's been your personal?
No, I'm kind of lazy when it comes to
You're
that.
The home theater guy.
I run conventional single line to all of my components.
Well, me and you are in the same boat on that one. I am equally as entry level when it comes to that, and I love the sound of my system. I'm not running any sort of crazy separates. It's just AVRs across the board, and it works for my situation. So I do think
you know what? Can I say a way to wrap this topic up would be to say, look, what we have worked really hard at SVS, and I don't want to make this. We always say this is not an SVS infomercial. This is about love of great sound.
We get yelled at for saying that, though. We get yelled at for saying it's not, but it's a brand. You know, we're doing.
We're doing it. We all work at SVS. That's not a coincidence.
Right.
But I will say what we try to do at SVS is if you don't have expensive gear, you can hook our stuff up to it, and it's going to sound great. But if you do have really high performance gear, and you use it with our product, like I do have some Mark Levinson connected to Prime Pinnacle speakers, you will see the benefit of that really high performance gear. It's kind of a scenario where it's totally up to you.
I think that's well said, and there's always that law of diminishing returns. But as you upgrade different things, if you really focus in on the critical listening, you can choose what makes the biggest difference. And that brings us to our next giveaway, which will be our acclaimed SVS Prime wireless speaker system, which we talked a little bit about earlier tonight as far as the Wi-Fi
with our
connectivity
high-res
goes.
audio
That's right.
streaming functionality.
Critical listening mode, which lets you
Critical
go at
listening
full
mode.
192 kilohertz, 24-bit. Trying to show, there's equal people commenting how they love the in-depth, in the weeds technical talk, and other people are like, what the hell is Ed saying? So, you can't please everybody.
Hey, sometimes I say, what the hell is Ed saying?
We all say that, yeah.
Yeah, actually, most of it was over my head. I just try to look
Yeah,
serious.
Bi-wiring is a little esoteric. I mean, we can discuss it at another time if you want.
It's a hot button topic which we figured out today. So I guess that means you guys can expect a blog to come out on that within the next couple weeks.
That's a good idea. We should do the blog.
We can do
one
right, for sure.
Done. See, education. All right. So our winner of the SVS Prime wireless speaker system with critical listening mode and a really fancy DAC is Jeff Baird from Facebook. Jeff Baird. Congratulations,
Jeff.
He's streaming in style in no time. All right. So with that giveaway, should we keep Ed on? Usually, half hour.
I'm having fun with Ed.
Ed,
are you okay to stay on?
You got a hot date tonight?
Happy to stay. Nope.
All right. Well, I did want to jump into a topic here that I saw a couple comments, approach, and that is with Dolby Atmos being the height effects and surround new object-based, not new, but object-based surround sound placement is a big issue in, I think, people's rooms. There's a lot of resources out there, so we'll get to you, Ed. But I want to start with Larry, because Larry, we haven't kicked it to you very much today, and I want to hear your voice, frankly.
Ed's here, man.
What can you tell us about Dolby Atmos placement and sort of some general recommendations before we get into the techie stuff?
Well, there's really three different ways to kind of go about doing Atmos. You can do the reflective toppers, which we don't offer and aren't really all that fond of as a solution. You can do in-ceiling speakers, or you can do a direct radiating, direct firing speaker. And all of them offer some sort of solution for everybody. I've always been a proponent of utilizing a full range direct firing speaker because it's obviously going to have a little bit more power, a little bit more capability, more crossover. So I think the elevation for us, it's been the best thing I've done to my theater since Blu-rays come out. And it gives you a ton of flexibility. And I know we're going to talk about placement and stuff too, but it's really not as important now as it used to be because of how good the room correction has become on receivers and how flexible you can be with placement. And that's really where something like the Prime Elevation allows you to set the speaker anywhere you want, really.
Yeah,
well,
I think
the best thing about Prime Elevation is because it's direct radiating, it's in the right place. So you don't have to obsess about exactly where it is. It's above your head, shooting height effects down to you. And that's 80% of the problem is that you don't hear the height effects as though they're coming from above you. And that is critical. That to me is one of the biggest steps forward in home theater sound since basically surround sound was introduced, because it created, instead of a horizontally a 360-degree space, but horizontal, now you have a three-dimensional space thanks to sound coming from above you. But if it's trying to fake its way to you, then that's never going to be as convincing as if the speaker actually is above you.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue people have had with the toppers is there's not enough impact. You're not getting enough of the sound to make it convincing. And that's why placement, when you have the opportunity to go overhead or, on a sidewall, makes such a difference. Ed, what can you say? What is your advice for people who may have an awkward room or a perfectly square room? Like, where do you begin? I guess the question.
Well, we do favor overhead placement because it's definitely more immersive than the ceiling bounce. That was really early adopters had that, and we've never really recommended it. So if you're running a 5.1.2 or 7.1.2 with two overheads, they should be maybe about where your knees are, slightly in front of the listening position, either high on the sidewalls near the ceiling or actually on the ceiling in line with the front speakers. If you're running,
leave Chris's question up there, Nick. That's a great question for after Ed finishes. Go ahead, Ed. Keep going. I'm sorry.
If you're running a 5.1.4 or 7.1.4 with four overheads, the front set should be about 45 degrees in front of you on the ceiling, and the rear set should be 45 degrees behind you. My system's set up that way, and I know Gary's is also.
And addressing this question here, I mean, I think this gets to why it's called object-based surround sound. Larry, do you want to
you,
Nick?
That was
did I get that one?
Answer.
Technical term.
Well, now we got to explain it, and I'm not doing that. So who wants to raise their hand and take that one on?
Well, a lot of it's based on the way the content was mastered, and so
you want to do it, Larry? Go ahead.
Well, there's content that's actually created that way.
So the question you see, everybody sees a question on the screen, which is how does this you've got a 7, for an example, a 7.1.4 system, or 7. Let's give them 2 subwoofers, a 7.2.4 system. So how does the surround sound preamp processor or receiver or whatever it is, how does it know where to send stuff, and what logic is it using to decide what to do?
Well, in most cases, that's going to be the way it was actually created by the sound designer or producer.
Absolutely, in all cases. When I say what logic, what was he thinking?
Yeah.
What was he trying to do?
It's like there's been a ton of movies that you guys have probably all seen that have come out in Atmos and DTSX and Oro 3D, and they're actually coded when something happens that if it's moving from front to back or in front of you and around you, the way the sound was designed was so that it sends a signal to that receiver, to that channel, say, yes, that's a height effect, or that's a surround effect, and it knows to go right or left. And there's receivers that you can feed content to that's not Atmos, and it will kind of guess that for your height effect speakers as well. So even if you're not watching content that was made for it, you can kind of emulate that out of a lot of systems as well.
Right, it up-converts it.
This comment, that's not true. I thought Atmos had a limited number of channels they could use, and DTSX.
Well, he says theoretically, he's right, and in the sense that basically the person creating the soundtrack. You're right, Larry. We're always trying to. That's what SVS is all about: being faithful to what the artist or the producer or the sound engineer intended. We always want to be faithful to that. So they're creating a digitally mastered multi-channel soundtrack, and it's designed to create this sense of objects in space in the room with you. And you tell your Dolby Atmos or DTSX, always both, and there's nobody that doesn't do both, Dolby Atmos / DTSX receiver, how many speakers you have and where they are, and then you run the room correction software.
That addresses this question right here. Like once you run the room correction, that basically tells the speakers when to play what.
You're going to tell the receiver what you have. I've got 2 in the front. I've got a center channel. I've got 2 on the side. I've got 2 in the rear. I've got 4 on the ceiling. 2 are in the front part of the room. 2 are in the back. You're going to tell it all those things. Then you're going to run the room correction software, and it's going to evaluate the different delays of the speakers, figure out how far away they are from your different seating positions, and then it's going to know how to send the sound to these different speakers to create that sense of objects in the room. And what's so phenomenal about that is, instead of this sort of horizontal, still convincing in its own way, surround sound field where some things come from behind you, some things come from in front of you, but it's all on the same level as your ears. Now all of a sudden, it feels like it's coming from specific points in space in a 3D rendering of the room, both in front of you and behind you and to the side of you, but also above you. And that is the next level of a convincing sound experience.
Yeah,
and it's a dome of sound.
Yeah, and it's not just movies. There's music. I saw somebody asking about where you can get music. There's music Blu-rays that are Atmos. There's streaming services like Tidal that are offering Atmos.
One of our friends is in charge of Dolby Atmos music. Maybe we discuss maybe inviting him to come on as a guest and talk about that. He could probably talk a lot about Dolby Atmos in general.
There's a lot of interest in it, and I put this comment up here because I wanted you guys to look into your crystal balls, and I think the adoption of it is just sort of now really gaining a lot of steam. So I think there's a ways to go with just the current technology before there's really any sort of major advancement. You have all the channels you need. So I don't know, Larry, you see anything beyond Atmos and DTSX and Oro 3D in the immediate future?
Well, I know that Sony is working on something for movie theater technology. You guys know I'm a movie geek, so I keep up with all that. But there's new movie theater audio systems that are coming out. The Oro system is pretty cool. It's not widely adopted just yet.
Hey, look, there's your boy Hans Zimmer.
There's Larry's track.
Greatest thing in the world. And he's doing the new Bond movie, so I'm pretty stoked for that. But there's, I think it's going to advance.
Billie Eilish is doing the new Bond song.
Yes, she is. So
very nice.
I think we're going to have a lot coming at us, guys.
Well, there's a ton of interest, I think, in height effects, object-based surround sound, and I think it's only now just scratching the surface what's going to be possible. I did see a comment earlier about what the biggest drawback to why we couldn't do a wireless elevation speaker, and I think the simple answer is power. You got to get it power, so that's probably the biggest drawback. But are there other challenges in terms of running a ceiling speaker wirelessly? Maybe Ed, you can field this one besides the power.
Well, power's the big one. You can't.
But I was going to say, there are technologies on the horizon where you can literally have a powered speaker that hangs on your ceiling or hangs on your wall, has a rechargeable battery, and the battery can be charged wirelessly from a module in the room with you. I've seen it work. Now, I don't think it's ready for prime time, but if you think about it, at that point, you wouldn't need wires anymore because the speaker would be powered. It could get a wireless signal, and we're constantly looking at stuff like that. It's not ready for prime time yet, but I don't think it's decades away. It's years away.
And just so you're clear, that's not a product teaser for SVS. That is just simply
it is not. But I've
Gary
seen
looking into his crystal ball.
No, but I've seen prototypes of this actually work.
Well,
so really, I think something's coming.
Whoever gets there first.
What's pushing battery technology is the automotive industry, with Tesla being a leader, and so battery technology is getting better and better, by the month and year. So at some point, you'll have a surround speaker that's battery powered that can be, like Gary said, recharged wirelessly, and using a wireless technology which has virtually zero latency or very low latency. So it's definitely reality. It's just not ready for prime time.
Not ready yet. By the way, the person who commented about the sound bar that has rechargeable surround speakers, yes, you're absolutely right, but you have to bring the speakers back to the sound bar and let it charge every few hours. I think you get 8 hours or something, and then you got to bring it back to charge. What I'm talking about is something where you would never have to uninstall the speaker or snap it off the bracket. It would just sit where it sits and get charged wirelessly. That's not here yet, but that's something that will come.
Kind of like how you can charge your phone wirelessly with in close proximity to the charger. That type of technology.
In the year 2000.
So hopefully soon. Well, I think we have one more giveaway to do. And with that, we're going to wrap up with our SVS SB2000 Pro. And I know we try not to make this an infomercial, but we are very proud of some of the recent award announcements for it. SB2000.
And we have more coming. More coming.
Come on now. Let's focus on the now. Worry about the future later. If we've learned anything of the last couple of months.
All right.
But Sound and Vision's Top Pick Award, AVS Forum Top Choice Award, AV Forums in the UK named it a highly recommended product. So we're just super proud of what the SB2000 Pro and the PB2000 Pro, which actually picked up a couple of those awards as well.
Before you give it away, Nick, can I just say one thing? What's really cool is they don't usually give a relatively affordable product like that these kind of reference top pick awards. So it's so gratifying. I'm not by any stretch am I saying that, something that costs in the neighborhood of $700 is inexpensive. I know that's a lot of money, but relative to the super subwoofers that win, these top prizes that are $6,000 and $7,000, I'm so proud that our team came up with a reference level of experience in something that's within reach of normal people. And it's going to be within reach of someone for free in a minute, right?
That's right. Somebody will be enjoying the spoils of all that wonderful bass, and his name is Michael Henry from Facebook. Michael Henry from Facebook.
Michael, congratulations.
Added some pump to your system, so congratulations. So we will be back in 2 weeks, and if my calendar serves me right, that will be July 23rd, Thursday, July 23rd at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Congratulations to all our winners. Ed, a wealth of knowledge as always. And if I had to guess, you'll probably be our first 3-time visitor as well.
Yep.
Yes.
Happy to be back.
Thing there. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in. We had a lot of fun. Cheers to you, and we will talk in a couple weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
And gals.